ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरयेत्। नष्टप्रायेषु भद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवती उत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्ठिकी। कृष्णाय वासुदेवाय देवकी नन्दनाय च नन्दगोपकुमाराय गोविन्दाय नमो नमः। उमज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनच्छलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपः कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरोः श्रीयुतापदकमलं श्रीगुरून् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं सागरजातं सहगणा रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनासहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधाकृष्णपादान् सगणलिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च हे कृष्ण करुणा सिंधु दीनबंधु जगतपते गोपेशा गोपिका कांत राधा कांत नमस्ते तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी शुभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये पंचकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्येव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौरभक्त वृंद हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। पादाय पृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमद् पादाय कृष्णपरिष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमति भक्तिवेदांत स्वामी नामिने नमस्ते सारस्वती देवी गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य चालम्बंगम वंदे गिरिम यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे श्रीगुरुं परमानंद माधवम श्री चैतन्य ईश्वर। Hare Krishna. So thank you all for joining. Firstly, my apologies. Somehow over the last couple of weeks, uh, we haven't been able to have our classes the way we have been doing regularly for various reasons. I was unwell, and some days I was caught up with something, and so on and so forth. Anyway, I do not want to go into all the challenges, but just to reiterate, as what I shared in the chat, uh, it seems that for some time having our Tuesday classes may be a bit of a challenge. So to avoid continuous irregularity there, I thought it's perhaps easier that for some time, I don't know how long, maybe a few months, we focus on the Saturday class. And in the Saturday class, we will alternately discuss the Srimad Bhagavat and Chaitanya Charitamrita. So that way we make some progress on both the topics. But the class will be for now focused on Saturday. So in case you did not see that message, just wanted to reiterate. What this means is today we'll be discussing Bhagavatam. So today we are discussing the sixth chapter of the sixth canto. The next class, the next Saturday, we'll not have a class on Tuesday. We'll have a class next Saturday. Next Saturday, the class will be on Chaitanya Charitamrita. So we'll continue Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Jagannath Puri pastimes from where we left off. Then the following Saturday, we will again continue Bhagavad from where we left off. So hopefully we'll complete the sixth chapter. So we'll resume our discussion of Bhagavad from the seventh chapter of the sixth chapter. And in that way, we'll alternate those. So in that way, we'll make progress for both. So let's see how it goes, and then we can, fine tune as we go. Also, hopefully, this will give some of you who are trying to read along also some more time to catch up on your reading. If at all you are doing a read along, that is actually a very beautiful idea. If you are able to, or if you can do. Some of you are doing, I know. So it's very wonderful. Also want to briefly express my gratitude to all the devotees who put in sincere efforts over the month of Kartik to offer lamps to the Lord on their own behalf and to engage so many others in offering of the lamps. So thanks to all the devotees who did this seva. Thanks to all those who also share their scores. uh, and by Krishna's grace and by all of your enthusiasm, we have done much better than the last year. I think last year was some 8,000, somewhere in that range. Now we have crossed 11,000. So this is good. So progress in bhakti is always progress in service. Why it is progress in service? Because service increases whenever enthusiasm for seva increases, when our devotion and our faith increases. Increasing service is a natural consequence. So of course, just the external aspect of increasing service is not necessarily a measure of advancement, but generally, because service is voluntary nature, generally increase in service is also voluntary, and that means there is an increase in the desire to serve, enthusiasm to serve. These are all symptoms of progress in the path of devotional service. So my sincere gratitude to all of you. And we offer all our efforts, collective efforts, at the lotus feet of Shri Radha Damodar, Shri Gaur Nitai, Shri Prabhupada, and all the acharyas, that they may be pleased by our small but sincere endeavors to please them and further their cause, their mission, to reach out to the many living entities who can become fortunate by coming in connection with Lord Damodar. So we are continuing our discussion of the 6th canto, the Srimad Bhagavad. This particular chapter of today is entitled The Progeny of the Daughters of Daksha. Now we have been discussing about Daksha. A quick recap, because we are connecting after some time. So if you recollect, we discussed about this Daksha. We said this Daksha is the same Daksha who was the father of Sati. He was born to Lord Brahma earlier, but this time he was born out of physical union, born on earth, and born with the seva of Prajapati nonetheless. And how, with great enthusiasm to perform his seva, which was also instructed to him by Lord Brahma, he made 2 attempts. One attempt was his 10,000 children, the Haryashvas, who were preached to by Narad Muni and who gave up their desire for family life and took to renounced order of life, much to the disappointment of Daksha. However, he kept quiet. He contained his anger, produced another 1,000 children, the Shavalashvas. He sent them to austerities to become qualified to produce good quality children. They went to the same place where their elder brothers, the Haryashvas, had performed austerities. They purified themselves. Narad Muni came to the same place again. Rather than repeating the whole previous class, Narad Muni told them very simple hint. Oh, your brothers were here earlier. You know what they did? Aren't you good younger brothers? You must follow the path of the elder brothers. They went in this direction. So because of their purification and of course because of the touch of a great soul like Narada, both the Haryashvas as the Shavalashvas were delivered. They were spared the pain of materialistic grihastha life. So while Narad Muni did the greatest service for them, Daksha did not particularly take it as a service. He took it as an offense. He took it as a hijacking of his agenda. What was his agenda? His agenda was to produce progeny. And Narad Muni was creating an obstacle. So he became very upset. And we discussed this in the last class. After the second time that this happened for the Shavalashvas, Daksha was so mad with rage that when came face to face with Narad Muni, he actually very severely, with very harsh words, criticized Narada, trying to preach to Narada that you don't know that this is not the way. Should have let my children become grahasthas and then through their materialistic life do all religious activities and eventually realize the futility of material existence, but you immaturely tried to make them renounce and you spoiled everything and so on and so forth. And went on. Narad Muni was very patient. Daksha not only used harsh words, but he went on and on and on until he was in such a fit of rage that he actually curses Narad Muni. What is that curse? Curse Narad Muni that may you never have a place of residence. Do not stay in any place more than 3 days. So Narad Muni, being a truly saintly character, Tikshavaha Karunikaha, is both tolerant and merciful. If you want to be truly merciful, you must be tolerant as well. And these qualities are very, very essential for a preacher because preaching is not an easy service. Preaching is not just a service that you go and give class. A preacher has to oftentimes hear the harsh words of those he's trying to help. They will challenge him, they will accuse him, they may argue with him, they may fight with him, all kinds of things happen. So a preacher has to be very, very tolerant. So Narad Muni actually was very tolerant. He did not react. Narad Muni was more than competent. Not only counteract the curse of Daksha, but to counter curse him. But the Acharyas explained that Narad Muni remained quiet. Of course, he remained quiet because as a sadhu, he was tolerant by nature, but Narad Muni had one more reason why he was quiet. Narad Muni was hoping, being a very great saintly soul, being so desirous of giving Krishna consciousness to everyone, he was hoping that he can also preach to Daksha. Because previously he had preached to the materialistic uh, King Barishmat. So he was hoping that, Daksha, who is also materialistic, I can hopefully change his heart. So he was hoping, Narad Muni was hoping that by his being quiet and humble, after Daksha, Prajapati curses Narad Muni and he remains quiet, maybe Daksha may develop some repentance in his heart, and when he feels repentful and remorseful, and if that repentant mood approaches Narad Muni, then Narad Muni will get the opportunity to sow the seed of bhakti in the heart of Daksha, and in that way save Daksha also. So Narad Muni was patiently waiting as Daksha was cursing and hoping that now at least he'll pacify and now he will repent. And then he'll take a humble position in front of me. But unfortunately for Daksha, that did not happen. Narad Muni was waiting when he will, because he expected that, maybe in a fit of anger he's saying like this, but hopefully, because many people say and give a curse in a fit of anger and then they realize, oh, what did I do? So Narad Muni continued to wait, but Daksha did not become repentant, and Narad Muni eventually realized, oh, this isn't happening. Daksha isn't feeling remorseful. Narad Muni was reflecting why this has happened. And after reflecting, Narad Muni comes to the conclusion that it must certainly be because of the offense that Daksha had committed in his previous life at the lotus feet of Lord Shiva. that he's unable to become repentant and he's unable to come to the position of receiving the blessings of a Vaishnava. So this is also a very interesting point. It's not mentioned in the verses, but the acharyas in this commentary, that offenses are actually much more dangerous than sins. Offenses can actually close the doors of the possibilities of receiving mercy for us. Sins will give us reactions, but they will give us muttered reactions. Sins by themselves do not directly become obstacles on the path of spiritual advancement. Yes, in the sense that it will, the reactions may create inconvenience, but the sins themselves do not directly obstruct bhakti. But offenses, aparadha, that which is opposed to Radharani, that which is opposed to the aradhana of the Lord, aparad, especially aparad to the great souls. And that is why the Shastras repeatedly guide us, warn us to be extra careful of not committing offenses against great souls. Today I posted earlier in the day a very nice quote of His Holiness Radhanath Maharaj, which I came across. I don't remember the exact word, but Maharaj said something to the effect that sometimes when some great souls make a mistake, we become so enthusiastic to judge and criticize them that Krishna, rather than being displeased by the original mistake, is more displeased by us for criticizing the devotee for committing the mistake. Understand? So a great soul made a mistake. Maybe, accidentally he did something, either in a moment of weakness or circumstantially he did something which was not expected from him. That he became angry or showed some behavior which is not an ideal Vaishnava behavior. Yes, that was some mistake. And it may be a true valid mistake. But then we get very excited. See how he is. Oh, such a senior devotee, he's doing like this. Maharaj is saying that he may have committed some offense, but Krishna is more displeased by your offensive criticism of a Vaishnava than an accidental mistake that a devotee may make. So these are all very subtle aspects of Krishna consciousness. So in this case, actually, Daksha was doing an offense. He had not only committed an offense to Lord Shiva, but now he was offensive to Narada Muni. Cursing great souls is also an offense. Criticizing, judging great souls is also an offense. Anyway, so that was the closure of the last chapter. So just in this recap. So net, after this long episode, 10,000 children, they went away. Another 1,000 children, they went away. Of course, in one sense, it's a reason to celebrate. 11,000 children became sannyasis and achieved perfection. I mean, is that a success statement or a failure statement? All of us can say, oh, we had children and we got them married and we had grandchildren. That's something which the world is going to celebrate. That's okay. I mean, that is a very ordinary level of success. It's fine. But how many of us can say, all the children that I produced became sannyasis and became pure devotees and went back to Godhead? And 11,000 of them. Wow. So Daksha, rather than being happy and excited about his achievement, he thought about it as a failure. And this is when a person, because of his offenses, is unable to see what is actually of value and what is not. So when the person's spiritual intelligence becomes contaminated by offenses, one is unable to see the higher principles of religion and sometimes becomes stuck on lower principles and neglects higher principles. Anyway, there are many episodes like this in the scriptures. The Yajna Patnis is also an excellent example of how the Yajnik Brahmanas refused to give the offerings to Krishna when they were hungry. Krishna and his friends when they were hungry. So Brahmana said, no, no, this is for Yajna, we cannot give. But Yajneshwar is coming and asking you, and you are refusing, and you are saying, I'll put it in the Yajna. So again becomes, So this happens when one doesn't have proper devotion. And because one doesn't have proper devotion, one doesn't have nacha ayuktasya bhavana. So one who is not yukta, not connected to the Krishna, he cannot have proper devotion, he cannot have proper spiritual consciousness, he cannot have proper spiritual intelligence, which is needed to make the right decision from a moment to moment in our life. So anyway, this whole episode happened, and then, practically after these two episodes, Daksha had practically lost any interest. He was so frustrated. After these two attempts, and then Brahmaji comes to him, he cheers him up with, oh son, don't be so despondent. Hota hai, hota hai. So don't be distracted from your duty. Continue. Your duty is to produce children. Get on with it. Fine. But this time, it is said Daksha decides that no more I want boys, because boys means very dangerous. Boys means they'll go to perform austerities. Narad Muni will again come. Very dangerous. So it is said this time, Daksha produced daughters. That is how the Bhagavatam explains. So in his wife Akshini, who was given by Lord Vishnu himself as his wife, the great Prajapati Daksha begot 60 daughters. No longer 10,000, 1,000 now, limited edition, 60 only. But these 60 played a very, very, very important role in terms of populating the universe. So this chapter is a very important chapter in terms of populating the universe. In fact, this whole chapter is about the descendants of these 60 daughters. So Daksha ultimately did not increase progeny through boys. He got 60 daughters. He gave the 60 daughters in marriage to various qualified men. And from their descendants, the universe got populated, and various personalities, including devatas, and so many species came from these various. And we will discuss that in brief. This chapter is actually 45 verses, but it's a long list of names. Who married who are the children, and so on and so forth. So this chapter isn't much of a story in the sense of a pastime. It is more of a genealogical tree of these 60 daughters. Each of them, they married these, then they produced these children produced these children, and this is how the universal population was expanded. So net, the end of this chapter, Daksha was successful. Successful in what way? Successful in his material mission of populating the universe after two failed attempts. But unfortunately, he could not appreciate sufficiently the actual success, which was to produce 11,000 pure devotee boys. Anyway, so sometimes, the thing is, individuals are fortunate, but they are not able to realize their fortune. To get children who are devoted and dedicated devotees of the Lord, detached from material enjoyment and fully surrendered to the Lord, what kind of a great blessing that is. I mean, that is the ultimate aspiration of every parent. The whole ultimate aspiration as per the scriptures is get a putra or a putri. Doesn't matter, boy or girl. But putra or putri, what does it mean? Putra means Putrayate iti putra. And the same thing for a female also. He who saves one from a hellish condition. Or in other words, a child, just like the father is expected to train the child, become a pure devotee, it is the duty of the child to deliver his father also. So he is a perfect child, becomes so great that he is able to deliver his ancestors. So here he had that blessing. And we see this oftentimes in Krishna consciousness movement also. Sometimes young boys, young girls take to the process of devotional service. All that their parents want is become doctor, become engineer, get married, get a good job, have children, have properties. Then we will showcase you in our community, and then we'll show how we are successful. But that seems to be the wonderful plan, but then the children turn out to be devotees. They turn out to be disinterested in materialistic life. Of course, they may still become doctors and engineers, but their interest is not in material affairs. And sometimes parents becomes disappointed. Sometimes the children may even take to the renounced order of life, especially the boys. We've seen this so many times. And rather than being pleased and being happy, the parents actually become very despondent. That this is a great calamity which has befallen me. That I got my child to be a doctor or an engineer, and look, he has given up everything and become a sadhu. But actually, that is a great fortune. Because to have a child can become a sadhu, or be of the caliber that they can become a sadhu, or for that matter, whether they are saffron or not saffron, become devotees of the Lord, serious, devoted, dedicated devotees of the Lord. It's a very big blessing. It's a very, very big blessing. Sometimes parents themselves are not exposed to proper spiritual values, do not understand the importance of spiritual life, and sometimes unable to appreciate the blessing. And rather than be happy, sometimes they create disturbance in the spiritual lives of their children. Anyway, so Daksha net became materially successful in his agenda, his 60 daughters. So we are going to briefly discuss. So I'm not going to be taking all the names which are mentioned in this chapters. Otherwise, you will all be drowned in a list of names for the next half an hour. So I'm going to pick up some highlights and try to summarize the chapter. You can go through all the details. Of course, the acharyas say that all these names are purifying because they are in connection with the Lord, connection with the Lord's creation. So not to minimize, they are all great souls. They are all mentioned in the Bhagavad. So, if your name is in the Bhagavad, then your life is fairly successful. Even though, you may not be such a great pure devotee like Dhruva and Narada and Prahlad. Nonetheless, you are an important part of the universal population related to such great personalities. And you're in the pages of Bhagavad. So it is said Daksha and Ashikini had 60 daughters. So the 60 daughters were distributed like this in terms of being given in marriage. It is said 10 daughters were given to Yamaraj, marriage. Okay. I am summarizing, then we'll go into details. 17 of the daughters were married to Kashyap Muni. They were married in batches. So I think initially there were some 10 and then there were 3, 4, something like that. There's a particular sequence. But net 17 were married to Kashyap, the great sage Kashyap. 27 daughters were married to Soma, the moon god. Does the name 27 ring a bell? in the connection of the moon. 7 moon. I think.
Nakshatras.
Yeah, yes, correct. Nakshatras. Yeah. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, right? Nakshatranam aham shashi. All the nakshatras, I am the moon. So these nakshatras are the wives of Soma. So there are 27 nakshatras. Then two daughters each were married, three personalities, sage Angira, Krishashwa, and Bhuta. So these are sages. At least Angira is. I'm not so sure about Krishashwa and Bhuta. So in that way, 10 plus 17 plus 27 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2, 6. So if you add all of them, it becomes 60. And the Bhagavatam says the descendants of these 60 daughters fill the whole world, their population. So this is when the actual population of the universe really started happening on a on a large scale from here. So of course, Daksha's frustration was also understandable from a material perspective, because it's trying to populate the universe and nothing is progressing. His project is not progressing. 2 failed attempts. Only he has his 60 daughters. So let's go through these various daughters who married these various great personalities. So the 10 daughters who married Yamaraj. So the 10 wives are named Bhanu, Lamba, Kakud, Yami, Vishwa, Sadhya, Marutwati, Muhurta, Sankalpa, and Vasu. So each of them had children. Many of their names are mentioned. So some of the prominent ones, it is said the wife Vishwa of Yamaraj gave rise to the Vishwadevas. These are a type of demigods, Vishwadevas. Then the Sadhya wife gave birth to the demigods of the category known as the Sadhyas. The Muhurta wife gave birth to children who are known as the Mahurtikas. It is said these children, Mahurtikas, are the demigods who are in charge based on the divisions of time in the day to give the fruits of the karma, various living entities, based on that time of the day. Interesting. Then the wife Vasu gave birth to the 8 Vasus. So these 8 Vasus are also famous demigods in the Vedic pantheon. Their names are Drona, Prana, Dhruva, Arka, Agni, Dosha, Vastu, and Vibhavasu. So even though it is not mentioned here, the 8 Vasus have a particular role to play in the Mahabharata. Anybody knows what is the connection between the 8 Vasus and the Mahabharata story?
Ganga's 8 putras, and one of them was Bhishma Dev.
Yeah, thank you. Correct. Yeah. So there is the story of how the 8 Vasus and the wives of the 8 Vasus together, they made a mischief. And they stole a cow, and then the sage cursed them. And cut a long story short, 7 of them, the sage said that as soon as you are born on earth, you will be killed. But the main one, who was their leader, whose name was Drona, you have to stay full life on the planet Earth, but you will be a virtuous, pious person. So Drona, the chief of the Vasus, came Bhishma. They approached Ganga Devi and asked her intervene, manage this curse. So Ganga Devi comes to earth. She marries who? Who does Ganga marry?
Shantanu.
Shantanu. Yeah, and then they have these children. So Ganga puts a condition to Shantanu. Don't ask me what I do with the children. And the reason is this, because the 8 Vasus are going to be born to us, all pre-arranged. And she is supposed to, because she wants to relieve the Vasus of their curse so they can go back to heaven. So she goes on putting them into the water, and they are getting released from their curse. And Shantanu, not knowing the background story, is getting frustrated. So he has his karma, they have this. See, karma is like that, so complicated. You don't know what is actually coming into your life, what is the complication, from where what is coming. One person is going through something else, another person is going through something altogether different. But all these stories are getting so intertwined because of various reasons. Anyway, eventually, when the last son, Devavrata's turn comes, Shantanu cannot take it anymore, stops Ganga Devi, and she says, okay, I will not put him into the water, but I have to go. I have to leave you now. Because I put that condition, didn't fulfill the vow. So I have to go. But anyway, this Vasu Drona, he grows up to become Devavrata. Ganga Devi trains him, and then he gets various celestial teachers, becomes a very great personality. Eventually grows up to become Bhishma, comes back to his father, and of course the rest is history. So this is the story of the 8 Vasu. Of course, eventually Bhishma Dev is a Mahabhagavad Paramhamsa. He's a very, very dear devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So in the end, it turned out to be a blessing for Vasu also, for Drona also. Became a pure devotee and achieved perfection. So each of these Vasus also in their heavenly abodes have their own children. I do not intend to go into that. You can read in the verses from 11 to 16. Then we spoke about these 3 personalities, Angira, Bhuta, and Krishashwa, had 2 wives each. So it is said Angira Muni had 2 wives, Swadha and Sati. Now this Sati is not the same Sati, it's the wife of Lord Shiva. So some of these names are repeated, but the same name is for different personalities for different times, just like all of our names are also repeated. We are not the only Kamlesh or Bhaskar or Anita or Tarun or Rita, right? All of us are, so many of them. So sometimes the name may be referring to the same person, sometimes it may not be referring. So we have to be aware of the context. Okay. So Swadha and Sati. So from Swadha, said the descendants of Swadha were the Pitris, inhabit the Pitri Lok, and the descendants of Sati and Angira is known as the Veda, as the Atharva Angirasa Veda. Bhuta, who had 2 wives, Sarupa and one more wife, has very interesting descendants. It is said the wife Sarupa gave birth to the 11 Rudras. Now in the Vedic tradition, all these personalities are very, very important. The 11 Rudras, the 12 Adityas, the Maruts, the Vishwavedas, the Sadhyas, So all these personalities are very important in the Vedic pantheon, and many yajnas and rituals offer oblations to them. So I'm not going to go into the details of what their roles and all this are, but these are all important persons who have a place in the universal affairs to the level that they are offered oblations in sacrifice. Correct? So if any of us are receiving oblations in a Vedic sacrifice, that means you must be very important. Because you cannot get oblations just by becoming CEO of Apple or of Microsoft or becoming Prime Minister of any country. These are all big universal positions. And that is why these kind of descendants are important. That's why we are discussing about these descendants. We're not discussing about my family tree or your family tree. This is a universal tree of how the universe was populated. So Sarupa gave birth to the 11 Rudras. And the second wife, it is said, she gave birth to the Pretas and the Vinayakas. So 11 Rudras are the 11 forms of Lord Shiva. And they, at the time of universal dissolution, play their own role and create havoc. They also have different roles. They are also staying in different places across the universe. That's a big topic by itself. But generally, Lord Shiva is surrounded by the Pretas and the Vinayakas. These are kinds of ghosts and you can call them goblins. Bhuta, Preta, Pishachas, who are surrounding. So they are the descendants of the second wife of Bhuta. The third personality, Trishashwa, he had two wives, Archis and Dishana, and they had their descendants. Now, very interesting personalities come, whose descendants. We want to discuss about the descendants of Kashyap. Kashyap Muni is a very, very interesting personality. We have discussed quite a few things about Kashyap in the previous cantos. Very great personality. He became a pure devotee. We discussed about, uh, you know, various beautiful things about Kashyap Muni. But here we will discuss about him mainly from the perspective of his role as a Prajapati. So Kashyap Muni, many wives, we spoke about how many wives in total, anybody remembers from Daksha's daughters?
17.
17.
Yeah, some of you are listening attentively. 17. Okay, so we will go through various wives and who are their descendants. Because some of these wives are very, very special personalities. So please listen to this part very carefully. Actually, almost the full rest of the chapter is about Kashyap's wives. Because we already discussed about Yamaraj, discussed about Angira, discussed about Bhuta, discussed about Rishashva. Right? So who remains? And of course, we discussed about, Soma with his, 27 nakshatras. So we'll discuss a bit more about Soma a little later because there's something interesting mentioned about Soma and his wives. We'll come to that story, or maybe I should quickly mention that story before we go into Kashyap's wives, even though that story comes a little later in the chapter. So it is said Moon Dev Soma, even though he had 27 wives, he had no children. So the question is why no children? So it is said, even though Soma married the 27 nakshatras, he was especially fond from his 27 wives of one wife whose name was Rohini. So Chandra is very fond of Rohini nakshatra. So he would always spend time with Rohini. All other 26 wives would feel neglected. Of course, they're all daughters of Daksha. So the rest of the 26 went to their father Daksha and said, our husband doesn't give us any time. He's all the time with our sister Rohini only. So Daksha becomes upset. He first tries to make him understand, but finally when he sees that Soma is not relenting and he's not being equal to all his wives, finally actually Daksha curses him. Daksha curses him that you will lose your shine. Such an effulgent god. And not only you lose your shine, you also will not be able to produce any children. So then moon god becomes very dejected. And he falls at the feet of his father-in-law. No. Give me one more chance. I will fix. See, this is the nature of living entities. Sometimes we are told nicely, don't listen. Until we are actually punished, we don't come back to our senses. Unfortunately, this is the reality. So sometimes people ask, oh, why Krishna punishes us? Because good words and good instructions don't enter our head. So sometimes only punishment works. So finally he pacified Daksha, and then Daksha said, okay, you will get back your moonshine. But the thing is, for 14 days, your moonshine will decrease, and then for 14 days, it will increase. It will decrease. And that's why we have the various phases of the moon. From Purnima to Amavasya, Amavasya to Purnima. So this was caused by the curse of Daksha. Anyway, so that was the small story of Moon and Rohini. So Rohini is the favorite wife of Soma. Let's get back to the story of Kashyap. So there are 17 wives, out of which we will discuss all. because each of them is very interesting. So some wives are not so well known, some are more well known. So each of the wife became the mother of practically a particular kind of living entities who populated the universe. So that is why this list is very interesting, Kashyap, and that's why Kashyap Muni is so interesting. So there was one wife whose name was Patangi. It is said from Patangi, the descendants of Patangi were the various kinds of birds. The second wife's name was Yamini. From Yamini were born the various kinds of locust insects. There's another wife whose name was Vinata. Vinata had two sons, and we discussed this very interesting story. One is Vainateya. Who's Vainateya? Garudaji. And also Aruna became the charioteer of the sun god. Remember when we discussed about Surya Dev, we also discussed about Aruna, his charioteer. So he's also the son of Vinata and Kashyap. So Aruna and Garuda are brothers. Then another wife, Kadru of Kashyap Muni, said Kadru gave birth to different kinds of serpents. Remember when we spoke about the lower planets? Quite a few of the occupants of the lower planets are actually descendants of Kadru. Obviously materialistic. Then there were another set of 10 wives of Kashyap. And I will go through them and who are their descendants. Timi gave birth to the aquatics. Sarama gave birth to ferocious animals like tigers and lions. Surabhi gave birth to animals who have cloven hooves like the cows. The wife Tamra gave birth to eagles and vultures and other large birds of prey. A wife known as Muni gave birth to the Apsaras. A wife called Krodavasha gave birth to serpents known as the Dandashukas, as well as mosquitoes. A wife known as Ila gave birth to various creepers and trees. A wife known as Surasa. You heard of Surasa? Ramayana, there is a story of Surasa. Surasa gave birth to the Rakshasas. Surasa is considered the mother of the Rakshasas. Wife known as Arista gave birth to the Gandharvas. Wife named as Kastha gave birth to animals like horses whose hooves are not split. So these are the 10 words. So you can see various kinds of insects, birds, animals, creepers. All of these various species are coming from Kashyap and his various wives. Now, what kind of DNA they have, what kind of biology they have to produce birds and insects and all that, and these are not beings like us. So do not worry, do not think that, these are Prajapatis. They are empowered. They are a different level of beings whose DNA is very different from ours. They have very different potencies, very different kinds of body and bodily abilities that they can produce different types of species. We cannot do that. We can only produce our species. Then another wife, prominent wife of Kashyap, is Danu. There are three very prominent wives of Kashyap: Diti, Aditi, and Danu. From Diti come the Daityas, from Danu come the Danavas, and from Aditi come the Adityas, which are the Devatas. Devatas, Danavas, and Daityas. Daityas and the Danavas are materialistic demoniac entities, whereas the Adityas are considered Vishnu Bhakta, great souls. So the combination of Kashyap and Danu actually resulted in 61 children, 61 sons. Out of the 61, it is said, the Bhagavatam says 18 were very important. And out of the 18, 4 were very important. We are only going to be discussing the 4 out of the 61. Briefly. One of their names was Swarbhanu. Swarbhanu, from Swarbhanu, son came Suprabha, who married, daughter Suprabha, who married Namuchi. Then a son known as Trishaparva, from whose descendants were the king Yayati and Sharmishtha. Then Vaishwanara had 4 daughters, and from their daughters, Hiranyaksha, Kratu, Loma, and so many other descendants came. Then one of the sons of Chap and Danu was Viprachitti, who married the demoness Simhika, and they had 101 sons, out of which one was Rahu, was the eldest, and there were 100 Ketus who were born, 101 sons. So like that, Kashyap and Danu produced various Danava children, and Kashyap and Aditi produced the 12 Adityas. Who are the 12 Adityas? Vivasvan, Aryama, Pusha, Vasta, Savita, Bhaga, Dhata, Vidhata, Varuna, Mitra, Satru, and Urukrama. Of course, out of these, Vivasvan is the sun god. Vivasvan had 2 wives. The sun god has 2 wives, Samgya and Chaya. So from the wife Samgya, certain very extraordinary children are born. One is Shraddha Deva, who went on to become one of the Manus, and also the twins Yamaraj and Yamuna Devi. Yam and Yami. Yam and Yami are brother and sister. They are the children of Vivaswan and Samgya. And Yami also gives birth to the Ashwini Kumaras. The wife Chaya, there's actually a very interesting story between Vivaswan, Samgya, and Chaya. We don't have time for that. It's very interesting. In brief, it is said that Samgya found Vivaswan too hot. Because nowadays when we say somebody is very hot, it means something else. But Surya Dev is really hot in a literal way. She was finding it too difficult to stay with Surya. It's too hot. My husband is too hot. So she produced her Chaya, her shadow, looked like her, but was not her. So she asked Chaya to replace her as the wife, and she went back to her father's house. So anyway, some interesting episodes happened, and finally Surya found out, and then he had children with Chaya, and the 2 sons of Chaya are known as Shanaishchara, Shanidev, and a Manu known as Savarani Manu, and one daughter who's known as Tapati. So these are all children of Surya Dev: Yamraj, Yamuna, Shanidev, and these 2. Of course, Vivaswan himself is one of the Manus, Vaivasvat Manu. But other than him, his children also become Manus in different Manvantaras. One is Shraddha Deva, and the other is Savarani Manu. So one family, so many Manvantara avatars. Then other special children of Kashyap and Aditi are Aryama. Aryama married Matrika, from many learned scholars were born. And from Aryama and Matrika also, it is said the human species was endowed with an aptitude of self-examination. Kashyap and Aditi also gave birth Pusha. Pusha is an interesting person. Pusha's name came when we discussed about Lord Shiva and Daksha episode. it is said Pusha had laughed at Lord Shiva, and his teeth were broken. It is said he had no children. And then Twasta was another son of Kashyap and Aditi, whose children are known as Sannivesha and Vishwarupa. So it is said this Vishwarupa became the guru of the Devatas. So it's very interesting. The chapter concludes by saying that even though Vishwarupa was the son of Twashta, his mother's name was Rachana, and Rachana was actually a descendant of the Daityas. So even though he was from the Daitya Kul in that sense, he still, because of a certain circumstance, Vishwarupa was accepted as a guru by the Devatas, because at one time the Devatas disrespected their guru, Brihaspati, and Brihaspati abandoned all the Devatas and went. So at that time, the Devatas were without any coach, without any guru to guide them. So at that time, Brahmaji advised them to take shelter of Vishwarupa. So that's also a very elaborate, interesting story. In fact, the next chapter is focused on how Indra offends Brihaspati and how and what was the consequence of that kind of an offense. So that will lead to the next chapter. So net, we are at the conclusion of this chapter. So net, like what we discussed, the universe was populated by all these various great personalities, so many of these Daityas, Danavas, Devas, and all these various species of animals, humans, birds, insects, snakes, creepers, practically all the various categories of species, aquatics, all practically that you can imagine. And all of these came through the various daughters of Daksha, who married various personalities, most prominently Yamaraj, Kashyap Muni, Chandradev, and the three other personalities, the Vrishashva and Angira. So this concludes the chapter on the discussion of the progeny of the daughters of Daksha. Thank you very much. Srimad Bhagavatam. Any questions? Yeah, Suresh Prabhu.
Yeah, Hare Krishna. Prabhu, Lord Shiva, whose associates are this ghost and other creatures, right? So he is in the material world or the spiritual world? Prabhu?
In his form of Shankar is in the material world. In his form of Sadashiva is in the spiritual.
So this current form, which Shankar form, where the ghosts are accompanying?
Yes. So that is in the material world, of course.
Yeah, so Prabhu, when Lord Shiva is in the mode of goodness, so their associates in the form of ignorance, right?
Lord Shiva is himself, he's transcendental, but he accepts the influence of the mode of ignorance, and he keeps his environment, especially because he's in the crematorium, he covers his body with the ashes of the smashan, and through that he actually attracts the ghosts and goblins, so that he gives them an opportunity to deliver them.
So
Lord
they are
Shiva,
also, yeah, Prabhu. So they get elevated at the end of day, right? In association with Lord Shiva.
yeah. So Lord Shiva's, what is Lord Shiva's service? They get delivered in the sense they are not going back to Godhead. The ghosts don't go back to Godhead. The ghosts are trapped in a ghostly body. The deliverance that Lord Shiva does for most of the ghosts, of course, there may be special situations where Lord Shiva may do more. There are really pious or devotional ghosts who are trapped because of circumstance. But generally, Lord Shiva's deliverance is those who are trapped in ghostly bodies. Lord Shiva delivers them from that karma that situation and gives them another body so that they can continue their evolution. Because ghostly species is a trap. You get trapped in that situation.
Yeah.
Right? So Lord Shiva's deliverance of ghosts. When we say a ghost gets delivered, what does that mean? He's stuck. Right? Those who are stuck, they are free. Correct? So if somebody is in a stuck situation, he can neither go up nor down. He's just stuck. He's not progressing. He cannot have a proper life because he's stuck somewhere in the middle, between life and death, like that.
Yes.
So such kind of species, Lord Shiva is very kind. Is Lord Shiva's seva to deliver these kind of living entities and give them bodies. So sometimes what happens, and this is why one should be careful, it is said that obviously these ghosts are not very qualified beings because they perform sinful activities. That's why they have got into these ghostly spirits. So sometimes it is said what Lord Shiva does is, if he sees some people performing unclean activities, or especially when a man and a woman come together in an unclean way, at that time it is said Lord Shiva sends these ghosts to be born from the union of such couples, especially when they have united at an inauspicious time, or in an improper situation or an improper way, unclean way. So, of course, they are given a body, but not necessarily that they attain necessarily a very auspicious destination. But nonetheless, they are freed from the ghost body. So at least they have an opportunity to make further progress.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Okay. Thank you very much. Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam ki Jai Shri Prabhupada.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, everyone. So a reminder, our next class will be on the next Saturday. And yeah.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare